The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation has been at the forefront of shaping regional economic integration and cooperation for over 3 decades. And amidst challenges like the global pandemic, shifting geopolitical landscapes and economic transitions, APEC has played a pivotal role in driving collaboration among its 21 member economies. And at the heart of these efforts over the past 5 years has been Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Fatima Sta Maria, a trailblazing Malaysian leader who has served as the Executive Director of the APEC Secretariat since 2019, Tan Sri. Dr. Sta Maria's leadership has not only steered the organisation through turbulent global shifts, but also strengthened the focus on inclusion, digitalization, and sustainable growth within APEC framework. As she enters the final year of her second term, this moment is especially significant in reflecting on her legacy and contributions. Dr. Sta Maria, it's a pleasure to have you with me today, and thank you for joining me. And would like begin by asking you to reflect back on your journey since 2019, leading APEC through such dynamic times. Maybe as you enter your final year as ED of the APEC, what leadership challenges and opportunities have stood especially the most during your tenure?
Thank you very much for having me. You know, it's been a very good experience for me. I brought with me the time I spent in the Malaysian Civil Service and the years that I spent as Secretary General of MITI, KSU of MITI. And during that time in MITI, I was really involved with bilateral issues, looking at Malaysia's interests. In APEC, there's a slight difference here. It's not about Malaysia's interests. So in my role, I have to take on board the interests of 21 member economies. So that's the difference. Yeah. And that in itself is a challenge, making sure that I am the reasonable voice for the group, the objective voice for the group, that I take on board the interests of the community, the Asia-Pacific community, as opposed to one particular economy's interest. So that's the difference. Yeah. And over the number of years, the 6 years, I've seen developments in terms of politics, in terms of economics, across the region. And you know, having gone through pandemic, the geopolitical tensions in the region, and having to straddle all that really called on the experience that I bring to this organization.
Tan Sri, you began your role in 2019, just before the global pandemic hit. And I still remember when Malaysia hosted APEC in 2020, and the shift from physical meetings to virtuals and navigating different time zones and other challenges. Maybe how did you lead APEC through such unprecedented global crisis, and what leadership lesson did you take away from that experience?
I think we have to go back to 2019 when Chile was hosting APEC at that year. And that was the year when we couldn't have the leaders meeting. I think in the history of APEC, that was the first time we couldn't have a leaders meeting. But having said all that, we had to find a way so that the organization, you know, at the end of the day, the organization is bigger than any one economy. So having to lead the process to say, yes, we can't have a leaders meeting, but that doesn't mean that APEC ceases to function. So we worked very closely. When I say we, it means the Secretariat, myself included, working together with Chile to ensure that the work that we did over the year, all of 2019, did not go to waste, you know, and that we still needed to deliver whatever we promised across the year. And that was very successfully done. So while we couldn't do a ministerial, we couldn't do a leaders meeting, we facilitated a senior officials concluding meeting so that we could then still announce to the world the amount of work that we did. Key to that was the La Serena roadmap for women's economic empowerment. And for me, that was so important. That was pivotal. And we did another 2 on sustainability. the marine debris roadmap, the IUU fishing roadmap. Those 3 documents were very important. Then you transition into Malaysia's year.
Yeah.
And, when we least expected, we were hit by the pandemic. And Malaysia had all its plans to show off what we had to offer, Malaysia had to offer. And with the pandemic, we had to work very quickly. We had to pivot very quickly to to having our meetings online. Yeah. And that was not easy. There was a time when some of us had not heard of Zoom.
Yeah.
And but I must give credit to the Malaysian team. The first virtual meeting we had was the tourism working group meeting. Okay. Malaysia was chairing it then. And that was the first time we went into the virtual format. Of course, there were hitches,
audio issues,
connection issues. Yeah. But we paved the way. I mean, that meeting, and I will always remember that meeting, that where Malaysia did itself proud, led that meeting, and subsequently we put in motion all the virtual meetings, getting the technology right. And in that sense, we were trailblazers. Malaysia did very well. Yeah. And the following year, when New Zealand took over, it was smoother. We basically learned all the lessons during Malaysia's year, and then the smooth transition. And the same thing with Thailand's year, because even as Thailand was going into a physical meeting, there was a second wave of COVID.
Yes.
And again, we had to go back to the virtual meeting. And again, it was pretty well handled, learning from the lessons that we learned from Malaysia's year.
Of course. I mean, it's very unprecedented. And I can say that Malaysia set the benchmark and also set the tone for how other countries, and especially New Zealand, the other hosts, to handle the meetings and especially economic leaders week and so on. Tan Sri, APEC has evolved since your appointment, and in your view, what are some of most significant policy achievements that APEC has made under your leadership, and particularly in areas like trade facilitation and also digitalization, women empowerment? Tan Sri.
I think we have to just again go back a little, and one of the things that we did, which was really a milestone for all of us, was writing and getting the APEC Putrajaya Vision 2040 in place. And that was done in Malaysia's year. So imagine having to negotiate the text for the vision virtually. If you ask me, that was amazing, amazing achievement to have been able to do that. So kudos to the Malaysian team for leading the process, because at the end of the day, it's how do you lead a process. Negotiating in person is tough. Negotiating in a virtual environment is even more challenging. And I think we did very well. So that was one of the key deliverables, or one of the key milestones in APEC's history. So having the new vision done in a year when we had the pandemic, that's key. And that vision really paved the way for where we are today. We looked at the drivers of growth. APEC used to be very focused on trade and investment. But with the vision that we put in place, it's very forward-looking. We looked at not just trade and investment, the economic drivers, trade and investment, digitalization and innovation, and sustainable and inclusive growth. Now, these are the 3 key drivers which is seeing us through today. So and the other important aspect of the work that we did, you have a vision, well and good, but a vision doesn't make any difference to anybody if there's no plan to implement it. So in 2021, again, in that COVID environment, we worked with New Zealand So working off the vision, translating that vision into an action plan, which we are which we're using today. So the Aotearoa Plan of Action is what's guiding, together with the Putrajaya Vision, the Aotearoa Plan of Action is what's guiding all our work today. So if you ask me what are the key deliverables that we have done, is getting that right. And if you look at what's happening in the world today, what we put in motion in 2020 is so extremely relevant to the work that is happening, not just in APEC, but across the globe, whether it's ASEAN, whether it's in the EU, all these issues that we flagged when we were drawing up the vision are things that matter today. You know, whether it's trade and investment, of course, but digitalization and innovation, the whole discussion on AI, climate change, all these things were encapsulated, and we've got the plan to roll this out to ensure that you do what you say you want to do. You know?
Tan Sri, I would like to bring our discussion into you yourself. As Malaysian leading influential global organization like APEC, how do you feel your background and maybe your experience from Malaysia have influenced your leadership approach and also policy priorities?
My experience in Malaysia has been key in guiding the work and the style of leadership that I bring to the APEC Secretariat. You know, the Malaysian environment, work environment, is very diverse. You know, that sort of prepares you for another organization like the APEC Secretariat, which is just as diverse. We have officers in the Secretariat from 20 economies, right? So because we are so accustomed to dealing with different ethnic groups, religion, that really helps in another environment which is equally diverse. You know, so that was one. Also the learning experience of having to navigate between policymakers, the business community, civil society. I mean, that experience that I had to go through while I was in MITI, managing these different voices, the politicians as well, really helped me in very good stead when I came into this role. Because, here, you know, although APEC is non-binding and it's a voluntary organization, it is so important to have the voices, the different voices. And that experience that I had while I was in MITI, having to deal with the different voices and making sure when we were negotiating trade agreements, it is not just about policymakers and the business community. You also have to work with politicians, you had to work with media, you had to work with civil society. So that experience was very enriching and really helped me when I moved into this role, because you're dealing with different economies, different political approaches, you know. It was really, really helpful in that sense.
Tan Sri, as one of the few women in a top leadership position, especially as I said in a global organization like APEC, what do you think are the key barriers to women's leadership in international organization, and how do you work to dismantle these barriers?
You know, one of the things that we do very well in APEC is research and getting evidence-based recommendations. So in the area of women's economic empowerment, we have there's a special roadmap. We have the La Serena roadmap for women and economic empowerment. Again, you know, it's good to have roadmap, blueprints and everything, but how do you implement it? So what we have at the APEC Secretariat, we have a policy support unit, and the policy support unit has maintains a dashboard. We call Women and the Economy dashboard. That dashboard, we survey laws, regulations, different aspects of women's economic empowerment. And we share the findings, every 2 years we share the findings with the ministers and the leaders. So that gives us a better picture of how we're doing and what we need to do, what are the challenges women face. So give you an example. For example, we often say, oh, it's difficult for small and medium enterprises to have access to capital. So one of the areas that we looked at for women entrepreneurs is their access to capital. All right? And we found that of the 21 of us, 9 economies have laws, legislation, which doesn't allow for you to discriminate women's access to capital, which means 12 economies actually say it's okay if you want to discriminate. So those are bringing that to the surface. You know, that's one area that we and I remember when I attend the Ministers of Finance meeting, I flagged this. I said, we got to do something about our legislation so that women can have access to finance. The other is voice and representation. If you're looking at APEC as a whole, what is the percentage of women in leadership positions, women in parliament? Right? And we are not doing too well.
Correct.
Okay. Across the region, we're not doing too well. So these are things that we need to make, we need to improve on if we want to be fair to ourselves. Now, 50% of the population, the world's population, if, you know, there's so much potential. If only we are fair to women and allow them to take advantage of the opportunities within our economy. So making sure that you have the legislation in place, you provide the necessary voice, opportunity for the voices to be heard, provide them with the necessary skills, women's access to STEM in education. So these are aspects of the work that we do in APEC when it comes to ensuring that policymakers are aware of what else we need to do. We haven't, we're not there yet when it comes to women's economic empowerment. So we must, and women who are in positions of, you know, in positions, I don't want to use the word power, but in positions where they can be the voice of the voiceless, they must. You know, they must bring it to consciousness that these are areas that we need to make improvements on so that our daughters, granddaughters have the opportunities that maybe we didn't have.
Tan Sri, as your tenure comes to close in 2025, early 2025, what legacy do you hope to leave behind, and what would you like to see APEC focus in the years to come?
APEC needs to continue its focus on inclusive growth and sustainability. We've done quite a lot of work in that area. We need to ensure that we're on the right track to make sure that, you know, when we say we want to be inclusive, that we really mean it, and the policies that we have in place provide that opportunity for everybody to participate, whether it's women, whether it's youth, whether it's small and medium enterprises, indigenous peoples. Their voices have to be heard, and they have the opportunity to participate equally and fairly in the economy. I think those things matter, and I think I've prepared an opportunity in the Secretariat for those voices to be heard, making sure that young people are not left out of the conversation that we're having. So in the Secretariat, encouraging a lot more interns, young interns to come, and people with disabilities to participate as well. So a lot more that we can do. You know, there's no end to it. It's just opening our minds and providing those opportunities.
And then I think you have advanced, I mean, in terms of the agenda for greater inclusion in APEC, especially, maybe you would like to focus on smaller economies and also underrepresented groups in terms of inclusivity. Of course, because it's a kind of like a critical theme in global leadership, Tan Sri.
You know, we have done quite a bit, and the discussion, the conversation on ensuring small and medium enterprises are not left out in the work that we do. So we engage with, we have dedicated fora, a dedicated forum to deal with concerns of the small and medium enterprises. That's one. The other is also a dedicated forum to deal with women's economic empowerment. And in both these two fora, it's not just the voice of policymakers. It's not just the policymakers who are in the room. We also have the business folks in the room to add to that conversation to ensure that the work that we do translate into practical solutions, whether it is for women's economic empowerment or for micro, small and medium enterprises. And this year, it's a special year for us because we're taking it one step further. In some of our economies, we have folks who are in the informal sector, so like your gig workers, for example. So how do you ensure that you provide the necessary safety nets for people who are in the informal sector? That will be a key deliverable this year to ensure that we move those who are in the informal sector to the formal sector so that they can benefit from all the trade facilitation measures that we've put in place. Now, even as we say that, the question is, why should they move to the formal sector? The formal sector comes with a lot more obligations in terms of legislation,
red tape,
tax. So the question is, what you need to do really, the question is, what have you done to ensure that the formal sector is attractive enough? That you want to do business. You find that the formal sector makes it easy for you to do business. Now, if the formal sector is a difficult space, why should you move? So that conversation was very interesting for us. This year, we really have formalized that conversation into a proper policy roadmap, so that economies who have a lot, like for example, Peru has 72% of the businesses or the people are in the informal sector. So, so that's a serious thing. You want to move them to the formal sector. So you need to get that right. You need to make sure that your formal sector is right. And that's what we've done this year. I think under Peru's leadership in this area, we've done a real benefit for the region, especially the smaller economies within APEC, all right, to see how we can learn from each other to move those of us who are in the informal sector to the formal sector, making sure that the formal sector, the necessary reforms, why should you go to the formal sector if just to start a business you need 20 forms? You got to deal with 20 ministries. So that kind of thinking. So to set that type of thinking right. And so fixing your formal sector so that those in the informal sector will say, it makes sense for me to move. I get the benefits, and it's not difficult. We have a saying in APEC, how do you make it easier, faster, and cheaper to do business? And that's the principle we stick on. Every time we think of those of us in the formal sector, how do we make it easier, faster, and cheaper to do business in the economy? And that's a key mantra for us.
Tan Sri, one of the pillars, as you mentioned before, about sustainability, is a growing concern globally. And how do you see APEC addressing sustainability and climate-related issues? And how have you championed this cause during your time as ED?
The Secretariat really works with the member economies. So there are a couple of ways we do this. One is through the meetings and interactions with the host economy. For example, this year we're working very closely with Peru. In 2020, we work very closely with Malaysia. So that's one. The other way is we have a policy support unit in the Secretariat, and these are where the research is done. And they do very practical research. It's always policy improvement sort of research. It is not academic research, as it were. We try to get out evidence-based material, research work, so that we share that with the policymakers. And it's a practical way to say, here's what you need to do, in terms, here are the policy changes that you need to make. For example, when you're looking at the just energy transition, that's the key deliverable this year. What happens when you try and move, say we want to phase out coal-powered plants, right? What is the implication to the people who are in that sphere, in that space. So how do we deal with it? What kind of skills do we need to make sure that they have so that they can transition to the renewable side? So these are the kinds of work that's being done, sharing of those best practices, getting the research right and sharing the research with member economies, having the engagement with experts and academics. So that's what we do. So in this area, in the space for sustainability, that's key work that's being done to ensure that we are able to have that just energy transition.
Tan Sri, as a trailblazing women leader in Malaysia, from Malaysia, what advice would you give to young women, aspiring them to leadership roles and also, especially in international diplomacy, global organization, for example, like APEC?
Yeah, one is to be open-minded, ever ready to learn new things, and always question. I always say this, you must always question the status quo. Never be satisfied with the status quo, because when you question, you learn. And don't be afraid to ask questions as well. Why do we do this way? Very often the answer will be, we've been doing this for many years. Why do you have to do it that way? So always question, always be open to learning. I think that would hold us in good state.
So, Tan Sri, my last question. What's your plan after this?
I'm going home. It's been 6 years. I need to go back home and see how we can work within our system to make things better for everybody.
Happy to hear that, Tan Sri. Thank you so much, Dr. Sta Maria. As you approach the final year of your tenure as Executive Director of APEC, it's clear that your leadership has left an indelible mark, not just on APEC, but on the region as a whole. And your vision for inclusivity, sustainability, and economic cooperation will undoubtedly continue to inspire leaders for years to come. And on behalf of Astro AWANI, we'd like to thank you for sharing your insights with us today and for your remarkable contributions to APEC over the years. And we wish you all the best in the final stretch of your tenure. And we certainly hope to see you continuing to make an impact on the global stage while giving back to Malaysians, Tan Sri.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.